The second story that we are following, demonstrations focused on the recent immigration enforcement tactics are growing in Tampa Bay as well as across the nation. Calls to end nationwide raids by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement are growing across many Tampa Bay counties into this weekend. On Monday, protesters against recent ICE actions chanted and held signs outside of Tampa City Hall.
It's really bad, and I hope they can stop doing the separating families and everything. But not all the people they cross like illegal. They're bad people. Some, like, we honest, we good workers.
A smaller group of demonstrators stood across the street in favor of actions deporting undocumented immigrants.
I just want people to come to this country the right way. We love immigrants. MAGA loves immigrants. We just want legal immigrants only.
Both gatherings remain peaceful for the most part, unlike the scene unfolding in Los Angeles. Thousands of protesters confronting ICE deportation teams there were met with law enforcement in riot gear and bolstered by federal troops. President Trump calling up the California National Guard and some 700 Marines on the grounds of law and order, without the support of Governor Gavin Newsom, who has sued the administration in response. This is all happening ahead of a nationwide demonstration set for this weekend dubbed No King's Day. It's described as a national day of protest against government overreach and current immigration enforcement policies. You can see on this map more than a dozen demonstrations are scheduled in many Tampa Bay counties starting June 14th. No King's Day coincides with President Trump's birthday. And Mike, this is certainly a story that so many folks are watching
Yes.
and very concerned about. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, one of the things we need to realize that, and I'm sure we all do, that's how Donald Trump got elected. I think that was his number one priority as far as talking to the public, and people voted for him. I believe in protesting, but very, hey, let's keep it the way it should be done. What's happening in Los Angeles is outrageous. Spitting on law enforcement officers, throwing rocks at law enforcement officers. I mean, that's unacceptable. Breaking in and breaking windows into stores and robbing those stores while they're closed at night is just unacceptable. And that's the wrong message that the protesters are sending to the rest of the country. And when someone sees that, the average citizen, I don't care if it's in Florida, New York, or Wisconsin, they're looking at this and saying this is wrong.
And there are certainly demonstrators who are out there participating in these events that are not taking
exactly.
illegal actions.
Right. But what do you see on TV? And what's being reported? And what is the Trump administration telling you and showing you on TV and in their press releases? And when the president speaks, he's talking about these people who are doing exactly that, spitting at law enforcement officers, throwing rocks at them, breaking into stores. When people see that, they're not going to be in agreement with those protesters. Here in Tampa, listen, you have the First Amendment. You have the right to protest, to speak out. Don't block roads. Don't block where people can get in and out. Don't block major highways. That turns people off.
There are passions on both sides
Absolutely.
of the issue. Christina, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we have to remember why these people are protesting. As an American, we believe in basic human rights. We believe in due process. If you're on American soil, you have a right to due process. And so if the federal government wants to deport people, there's a legal way to do that, and they also need to follow the law. But what happens with these protests is that they do come out peacefully to protest and lift up their messaging, but then it also gets infiltrated by people who want to do bad things within the community. And so if the federal government decides that the right path is to deport people, they're going to have to do it legally, and we're going to have to find a way to lift our voices up and kind of highlight some injustices that are happening here.
What are some of the different voices that you all have been hearing from when you go out into the community with regards to this issue? When you specifically, your beat is politics, so I'd like to ask you, Kirby, on that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who are upset at the way these raids are being conducted, both because they're now moving into workplaces. Like in Tallahassee, there was a more than 100 people got arrested for allegedly being undocumented at a construction site. The ICE raids, or the protests in Los Angeles rather, started over ICE raids of, I believe, a Home Depot.
A parking lot of Home Depot, yes.
And so I think it's partly how it's being done. Also, the ICE raiders are not being very forthcoming with their own documentation of where they're coming from, what their names are, who's assigning them to do that, what the warrants are. It's not a very transparent operation. Not that it necessarily has to be until we get to the court phase. But I think there's a really interesting dynamic here overall, which is there's a lot of back and forth about whether the tactics being used in Los Angeles are justified. Trump sending in the troops, Trump sending in the National Guard. Is that necessary? And if you look at polling, I read today, if you aren't paying that much attention to the news coverage, you support what Trump is doing in Los Angeles by 19 points. If you're paying a lot of attention, you don't support it by 19 points. Right. So it's sort of up to how much you're willing to look into, whether you think troops should be on the streets of a major American city.
I do want to respond to something that was said earlier about the protests. I think it's interesting that the protests and the scene that we're seeing in LA, that's what's getting people across the country out to start their own protests. It wasn't the deportations themselves. As you mentioned before, there were worksite raids happening here in Florida, and when that happened, no one acted. It was the outrageous images that people were seeing from the West Coast that was getting them to come out and start voicing their opinions here.
But I think that all sort of plays in Trump's favor. Like, he wants the chaos.
There's no question about that.
It's no problem if there's a lot of protests all over the country, because that means there may be more opportunities for recriminations on both sides, right? And to be fair, there was a protest in Tallahassee in the wake of the 100-person deportation that I mentioned. It's just that it was entirely peaceful, and I don't think Trump's going to send in the troops to Florida anytime soon.
No, it's only going to be a blue state that
Right.
he sends the troops in. I don't agree with the president what he's doing as far as sending the troops in. That's not what their job is. We have local law enforcement officers that do a wonderful job. The men and women, they're trained to do this. And let them do their job. Let the mayor do their job. Let the governor do their job. I don't know what happened to Republicans at times, but I'm still a states' right person. And when we see the federal government coming in, we've got some issues.